going on? This is Thurston from Album 88, and today I have an interview for you with Bodysync, which is Ryan Hemsworth, and is it giraffage? Is that how it's pronounced?
Yeah, you could say giraffage. I've gotten like giraffage and
Okay.
giraffagey, but yeah,
Word.
generally giraffage is the
Okay.
correct way to say it.
Cool. So giraffage or Charlie, thank y'all for joining me today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, yeah, so y'all have a show in Atlanta coming up. Is it on the 29th?
That's right.
Awesome. And that is at aisle 5, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And before it got postponed because of the pesky hurricane, it was part of a tour for your album Nutty. So how did that tour go?
Yeah, it's been good. We kind of have the luxury of sort of making an itinerary that fits our uh, desires. So it's sort of just stretched out dates that we kind of compile and call a tour because you kind of need to like package things that way now. But yeah, basically we were able to because we live in opposite sides of the continent, basically. So we just meet up wherever the show is. If it's a Friday, Saturday, usually, and then yeah, hang out for the weekend and then go home.
Awesome. Yeah. And I guess since you have a show coming up in Atlanta and there may be people in Atlanta who see this, um, what may someone be able to expect from a Body Sync show just in general?
We generally
Mm,
try to play mostly original tracks. And if not that, like at least edits that we've kind of tinkered with. I'd say like maybe 70 to 80% of the set is like that. So yeah, just a lot of body sync tracks and some unreleased, a lot of released, and a few random bangers here and there.
Word. Um, and on the topic of those Body Sync tracks, back in June, y'all released the album Nutty. So what was the process like making that album?
yeah, we did our first project like 2 years ago now, and we kind of just always work on music, like just send stuff back and forth, and generally it's like Dropbox collaborations pretty much. But yeah, so we kind of have always just like had stuff that can fall into certain places, and yeah, I think we jumped through a few different ideas of like concept albums. Like initially it was like make a sport album, like a Jock Jams project, and then we sort of like yeah, morph that into like maybe like a radio, fake radio thing, and then I feel like Nutty just became like a big weird combination of those ideas and just yeah, trying to make stuff that like sounds like early 2000s like Banga Boys and stuff that we grew up on.
Yeah, I feel like the key operative word for this album was is just nutty. Like it what that wasn't the title originally, but it just, we kept going back to that word like in terms of what the album would sound like. And so eventually it kind of just stuck, and that just seemed like a way more, fitting name for the album.
Word. Yeah, I checked out the album in preparation for this interview, and it is really sick. So congratulations on that release.
Thank you.
Um, and obviously together y'all are Body Sync, but you do have your own solo works. So how would y'all say that your solo work influences or even differs from what y'all do together as Body Sync?
Yeah, I guess I approach it as differing as much as I can. Um, I mean, there's gonna be your tendencies that always bleed through, but for Body Sync, I try to like within the project file, like not have more than like 6 or 7 layers and like just keep the approach always like super simple, like trying to imagine because I'm not really using hardware, but imagining, a producer in the 90s that really only had like three or four pieces of gear and just sticking to that limitation. And I think that helps with creating a consistency that I haven't always had the easiest way of like getting with my solo stuff, which I always just overthink and make 100 layers in each track and stuff like that. So it's a fun kind of opposite exercise in that way, like that people would usually do with a side project and just doing less for me at least, you know?
Yeah, and I feel like due to the nature of how we're making the music, like we're just sending each other project files via Dropbox, and Ryan's actually using like a totally different software than what I'm using. And just due to that fact, like I feel like the tracks have to be stripped down in a lot of ways just to make our lives easier. And that just adds this whole new, I don't know, just like this new sound that I wouldn't be able to do on my own because of this like kind of limitation that we're imposing on ourselves.
Yeah, I am curious. Like you mentioned, doing the Dropbox collaboration, basically. So, without, I guess, spilling too much of the sauce, like I'm curious how y'all bring those together. Like, does one of y'all send a certain, like a drum track or something, and then the other expands upon it, or does it just kind of mash together somehow?
Yeah, it kind of differs from track to track. A lot of times I'll start an idea, a lot of times Ryan will start an idea. But generally we send each other just like raw stems. Like we just bounce everything to audio. We don't really work with like MIDI and stuff like that just because we're also using different softwares. Um, so yeah, it's mostly just audio manipulation.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, it's there's no method to the madness, I guess, and that's kind of a fun part of it too, is like I mean, there's a lot of tracks that are perfectly half and half in like contribution or whatever. And then there's others that are like, way more Charlie or way more me. And I thought it was kind of fun at a certain point that I realized like we're also working in like with like Blink 182 and like one of them would fully write one of the songs and one of them would fully do the other song or maybe Beatles or whatever if you want to use that reference instead. But yeah, that's sometimes I like that. Like I don't see that much in the producer world, where, people kind of like split things up in different ways versus like needing to 50-50 everything, which sometimes I was trying to do and it just felt forced.
Yeah, I think a lot of the first record and just a lot of like early collaborations, we tried to do everything very 50-50. Um, and now that we have a body of work that we can kind of reference, it's cool that we were able to get to this point where like we kind of just know if this sound will work for the project and if it needs to be, worked on anymore or if we can just stop at whatever point that it is.
Word. That's awesome. Yeah, I always am curious how, like, when a track has a bunch of different producers, like how did y'all each get something in there? Like, um, but yeah, that's a sick process to hear about. Um, and in terms of another aspect of this project, y'all have, I think, two music videos for them, and they're both very crazy in their own way. And I guess I'm just very curious about the story behind both of them.
Yeah, I mean, we work with this group called Mortis Studio. They're based in San Diego, and they've done all of the sort of like art direction for the project with the rabbit and all that stuff. Um, and yeah, they're just like really goofy dudes that used to do yeah, stuff in like cartoon world and all that. So yeah, they have ideas that they'll send us sometimes, and then we'll bounce back and forth. But I feel like for me and Charlie, like it's easy to be within like an electronic dance world and have a sort of like look or style that's expected or sometimes even imposed on you for like making a video or whatever. And for me, like I'm definitely thinking of like Michelle Gondry and Spike Jones and that era of like weird videos for the sake of just like having fun and like you know, making stuff that's hopefully at least visually memorable in that regard. So yeah, that was sort of the start of it. But we also, when we talked about the project, like we always kind of wanted to like world build a little bit and like imagine like who are the like weird characters in this like nutty world and stuff. So we are like, let's make it very like cartoony with like the magic guy and like the old lady with the pie and all this stuff. So yeah, it's just like fun to make that become a real thing.
Yeah, for sure. Memorable, absolutely. Like I loved those videos. So I definitely think you accomplished what you were going for. And you mentioned in the midst of that the rabbit character, which I've noticed has been consistent since y'all's first release as far as I could tell as Bodysync. So I'm curious, like who is that rabbit? Like does it have a deeper representation or is it just kind of a mascot y'all created?
Yeah, we
Yeah,
kind of
it's
just wanted like a symbol for the project, like instead of just, me and Ryan being the face of the project, like having this character be the face of the project. And yeah, it's just been fun like working that into the various ways that we brand ourselves, like via merch or the music and like music videos and stuff like that.
Hell yeah. Um yeah, and I guess that kind of covers the main questions, but just moving forward, y'all have put out Nutty, you're about to close out this tour, but what is next for Bodysync or either of y'all separately?
So we
yeah,
have a
we've been
handful. Sorry, go ahead, Ryan.
oh no, yeah, I was probably gonna say the same thing. I mean, we've been as I mentioned, we are constantly making stuff, so we're kind of like finding the places that those songs fit in and doing more collaborations, like stuff with other producers and stuff for next year. So, yeah, I feel like we're finding our way to sort of like ramp things up in a fun way. And separately, we're both working on albums as well.
Cool. Well, I guess that will about do it. Thank y'all so much for joining me again. Um, and if you're seeing this before it happens, be sure to go see Body Sync at Aisle 5 on, is it November 29th?
That's right.
Awesome. Cool.
Be there.
Hell yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for
Yeah,
having
of
us.
course.